I love a never-built railway project. I think it's fascinating to imagine what might have been if history had gone a little differently. So today I want to talk about the biggest, most complex station London never got. A station for everyone. A massive station in the city itself, serving all parts of the country, yet which was blocked by Parliament. A proposed station that was never built, but without which we might not have the Underground. I'm talking about Farringdon Street. Now I know what you're thinking. But Jago, there is a Farringdon station. Why are you claiming Farringdon was never built? Why do you tell obvious lies like this? You make me so angry sometimes. Unsubscribed. So let me explain. In the 1830s, railways started coming to London. The first terminus was London Bridge in 1836, then Euston in 1837, Paddington in 1838, Shoreditch in 1840, Fenchurch Street in 1841, and so on. And then things started getting silly. The 1840s brought the first railway mania, when literally hundreds of proposals for new railways were put forward. Most of these were a lot of rubbish, ideas put forward by speculators who didn't know the first thing about railways, but did know that they were an easy way to make a fortune. They were actually wrong about that, but a fool and his money, etc., etc. Not that all of these proposals were stupid. Some actually did get built, and some, having been refined and reworked, showed real potential. By 1846, there were 19 serious proposals for railways in the city. The proposal for a giant station at Farringdon is particularly interesting because it's really a predecessor to the Underground. It was put forward by Charles Pearson, a prominent lawyer and later Member of Parliament. He was a radical by the standards of the early Victorian era, being pro-universal suffrage, against anti-Catholicism and anti-Semitism. He was pro-disestablishmentarianism, anti-capital punishment, anti-corruption, and generally the opposite of the average person who promoted railways in those days. The roads of the city were, if anything, even more congested back then than they are now, and the city was badly overcrowded. Pearson saw railways as the solution to both problems, taking traffic off the roads and enabling people to live further away from their place of work in more pleasant conditions outside the city. But it wasn't as simple as just building a railway. Railways through the city were expensive because land in the city was expensive. It had buildings that needed clearing, and these weren't slums that you could just knock through. Charles Pearson proposed the frankly insane notion at the time of building railways underground, which would minimise disturbance. The railway he suggested was a 6-track main line shared by several companies with a giant station in Farringdon. What this station would have been called is not clear. Some call it London Central, some call it Farringdon Grand Central, some call it Farringdon Street. I like Farringdon Grand Central myself. The western side of the station would have been Shoe Lane, north Holborn Hill and Skinner Street. Old Bailey would have been the western side. Fleet Street and Ludgate Hill lay to the south. Farringdon Street would have cut right through the middle, north to south. There would also have been 2 new streets running through it. One is of particular interest. This part of London is the Fleet Valley, where there's a sudden dip due to the existence of the River Fleet, which is now mostly underground. Pearson saw this dip as an obstruction to traffic, so he proposed a main road that would cut right across it using a viaduct. The road he proposed in this plan wasn't built, of course, but Holborn Viaduct was a very similar scheme built in the 1860s. It was slightly north of Pearson's proposal. It basically replaces the aforementioned Holborn Hill and Skinner Street. North of the passenger station was to be a goods station of similar size. Note that Farringdon Grand Central would have been a little south of the Farringdon station we actually got, although I do wonder if the goods sidings would have reached the current site. They would almost certainly have encroached on the site of what we now know as Smithfield Market. Now, while this was to be a unified station, at this time there was nothing like a coherent network of railways in Britain. Therefore, the station would have been divided into 4 sections, each owned by a different company, with space for a 5th. Which companies these would have been is unspecified on the plan, although I do know that the Eastern Counties Railway had their eye on extending to this area at the time. The station would also have incorporated a cab rank and an approach road for carriages, as in road carriages. Around the sides would have been shops, hotels, offices, and a fruit and vegetable market. Presumably an attempt to recoup some of the massive costs of building this monster. What would the station have actually looked like? Well, I don't think it would have been a King's Cross or a St Pancras, a huge and very visible advertisement for a railway company. More likely, I think from the outside, it would mostly have been fairly discreet, with a few modest station buildings in the architectural style of whoever wound up using this thing. You must bear in mind that a lot of people, many of them very powerful, were opposed to railways, so something non-intrusive would have been preferable to something grand. As for the passenger experience, the railways would have approached the station from underground, but the plan appears to indicate that the station would have been open, which would have been pretty essential in steam days, especially if you had up to 8 trains idling there at any one time. Perhaps it would have had an overall roof open at the ends, not too dissimilar to what there is at Farringdon, but that's just speculation on my part. So why didn't it happen? Well, with so many different proposals, there were concerns from many quarters that the ancient city would be overwhelmed, built over, and sliced up. Parliament proposed that the centre of London should henceforth be a railway-free zone. A royal commission was established in 1846. The commission's full name was the Royal Commission to investigate the various projects for establishing railway termini within or in the immediate vicinity of the metropolis, which is wordier than a political meme, so let's just call it the Commission for now. The Commission mostly agreed with the parliamentary proposal, determining that companies couldn't just build railways willy-nilly, and within central London there would be no new lines. They would ease up on this later, hence the existence of Cannon Street, Charing Cross, Liverpool Street and Blackfriars today. But by that time, Pearson's proposal had been well and truly squashed. But something perhaps even greater came of it. Pearson never stopped campaigning for railway improvements in the city. In fact, he argued that concentrating mainline termini around the outside of the central area had in fact made traffic worse. He still thought an underground railway was the solution and pushed for a line that would connect all the major termini together. The plan underwent a great deal of evolution, and finally, in 1863, the congestion-relieving commuter railway was complete. You would know it as the Metropolitan Line, which of course was the start of the world's first underground network. A couple of years later, a line would be built to meet the Metropolitan, following more or less the same course as Pearson's suggested approach railway. And in 1990, a station would be built on almost the exact same site as Farringdon Grand Central. It's still there, and it's known as City Thameslink. When we look at these proposed lines, we can often say in hindsight that they were naive or ill thought out. But having seen the way railways actually did develop in the city, I honestly think Pearson might have been onto something with this one. Hello all, I hope you enjoyed this proto-tale from the tube. If you did, please do click on that thumbs up button to let YouTube know, and consider subscribing for more if you have not already. Thanks once again to my generous donors on Ko-fi and Patreon. You are the Charles Pearson to my Metropolitan Railway. And I'll see you all again very soon for another tale from the tube.